and then again into this room where these people were that were taken from the third world and brought into this world. And when I was shown from above, what I saw was this city that was very, very much filled with light. So there were cities, but they weren't all over the earth. They were just sort of in pockets here and there. And so when I myself, as Miriam, look back through history at this, I see it as being some of these lost worlds that have been looked for, and some of them, part of them, found over the course of our lifetimes or over the last 100 years. So these three worlds that were talked about prior to this one, it makes very clear sense to me in my limited knowledge of anthropology and paleontology and all of the rest of it. It just looks clear to me that these were the different worlds.
Okay. My next question then that comes from that is that it sounds from what you're saying as if you're talking time scale of the responsibility of the caretakers. I think you call them that word. Other contactees, of course, have called them different terms. Some people call them the watchers. Jim Sparks called them the keepers. These are all approximations, presumably kind of transposed into our language, for some kind of a guardian race. Maybe that's another term that we could use. But the time scale we're talking about seems to be huge. We're talking about certainly hundreds of millions of years and possibly billions. How advanced are these people? Where are they from? Who are they? Or are they extraterrestrials? Are they time travelers? Are they us in some way, as some people, in my view, compellingly claim? Do you know what the score is here? And what's the relationship between them and the other extraterrestrial races that you must have heard about?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to address the different names, the keepers, the watchers, the caretakers. I call them all of these things myself. And the reason that I do is in part because they are all of these things. They do watch over us. They do take care of us. They are our caretakers, and they keep the knowledge. In my book, I write they are the keepers of the knowledge, that the indigenous people are. They too are the keepers of the knowledge, and so forth. So all of these terms, these different terms that we use to describe them are correct, in my view. The other question was, what kind of a scale are we looking at as far as time is concerned? Now, it is my understanding, again, from what they've shared with me on board that craft, that they have been here since the beginning of the Earth, and that they had a hand in creating humanity. That they too, as it was described to me by them, that they too seek to know God, meaning the creator of all that is, all that was, and all that will be. The creator of everything, the very beginning, the source of all things. So they were given a task. It's like saying, whatever your job is, when you get up in the morning and you go to work, that's what your job is. That's what you know that you do. Well, when we are here on Earth, it is no different for them than to say that this is what they do. They are the caretakers of the Earth, and this is what they've always done. As far as what timeline they're from, it was also described to me that some of them are from our past, our present, and our future. Because the way that time was described to me, they did have the ability to go back and forth and in the present. They did have that ability. How? You'd have to ask them that, because I have no idea. But they also said that some of them were physical, that they were no different than you or I, that they lived on the earth, that they did live under the earth, inside the earth, that there were others that were interdimensional beings, and there were others on different planets. That all of them were created for the same task in these different areas, and they all had the ability to communicate with one another, and it was like saying that they were cousins. So it's a very complicated question to answer because it is so complicated to explain. It's almost beyond my words to be able to clarify it.
Contact Henry Deacon, who has encountered these situations from a completely different standpoint, working under contract for the American military and American intelligence services, has said that it would take a book of at least 1,000 pages, and he just did not have the energy to write that. Or maybe he said 10,000. Maybe he's not counting. And the impression I got is that this whole backstory is so complex, so deep, so convoluted, almost beyond human understanding, such a backdrop of complexity, that it's like, who are we to try and figure this out? We've actually got our own problems. Anything else is just intellectual curiosity, but the fact is that they're there. At least some of them are caring about us, it would seem. The question I do have, though, linked with what I was just mentioning about the American military and American intelligence services, do you know anything about the possible relationships of this group with the military, or is it a different group of aliens that they have been working with? Do you know anything about that, or is it a question you're unable to answer?
The question is, will I answer? I have not been told anything directly by these beings as to any relationship that was formed with any government or any group on the earth. So let me make that clear. I have not been given any direct information regarding that. They haven't said, yes, we work with these people, we're working over here with that person. However, I have been shown and told certain things that were of a darker side, and warned of certain things. For example, at one point I was shown something it's difficult for me to talk about. I was shown an image of being in an underground base, that what took place there was so dark and ugly and horrifying to me that it was difficult for me to deal with. I don't know how to say this nicely, but it was I saw images of beings and of creatures that were just beyond the human comprehension of being able to see in real life. Now, what happened in this time that I was shown this, I was in the astral, and the being, the tall blonde that I was with, said, you must be very quiet, because if you're not, they will know that we are here. And don't ever come to this particular area, it is very dangerous for you. And I said, okie doke, I'm not going anywhere near there. And so do these tall blondes have associations with certain groups on the planet? No, not that I'm aware of. You asked me about these other beings that so many people are familiar with, which one of the biggest ones is the Greys. I do not have any direct, direct information, but here's what I was told by the tall blondes, that they are here as the caretakers of the earth, and that they would help protect us from ourselves or other things or that we may not be aware of. So does that mean other beings? Absolutely. Does it mean that there's a presence of other beings on the planet? Absolutely. Am I here to talk about those beings with you? No, because I want the message of the tall blondes to be really clear with people that they are here in peace and that they do not mean us any harm. They will not come here and take over the earth. That is not their purpose. If it was their purpose, they would have done it long, long ago. And they do not have a dark agenda in this genetic program that they have going. And I want to talk about that because it's something that's very important to the people of Earth. In the third world, these individuals that were created for the purpose of spiritual development. And when the spiritual development was taking place, all of this knowledge about spirit and life was a part of who we are, where we're from, and where we're going. But again, to reiterate what I've already said, it was like giving children matches. They just didn't deal with it very well. So what has happened since the beginning of our existence as humanity is that different families all over the earth have been given this certain genetic information in our genome, right? And along the way, certain families are, quote, monitored by these caretakers, not to do anything dark, but to help so that very slowly these vessels that we are living in, that we are a part of, have the ability to withstand this greater information and knowledge. Because of course our brain is nothing more than a computer that is based on an electrical charge within the body. So if we are overloaded with electrical charges, we will not be able to control the pathways in which this information is flowing, and we become crazy. So these families have very slowly had their DNA, new strands of DNA, to help facilitate greater understanding, greater knowledge, greater respect for ourselves and the earth. And that's what's happened with these families that are being monitored. So that is also why sometimes people have had these things running in their families, because they're one of these families that have been monitored. And that's why the path leading back to where we all came from would be very interesting, to be able to look at the family tree of some of these families through time. So
isn't this the, this is actually, the Greys are in a sense working for, at least one faction, are working for the tall blondes, or however you want to call them. Because you're talking about also in your 88 experience, you had the 4-foot tall beings. Those were, I assume, the Greys, showing you onto the ship, and at which time you were, you know, meeting with the tall blondes. So what happens is the Greys are actually handling the genetic sort of manipulation under the direction of perhaps these higher beings.
Only to a certain degree, and there needs to be some clarification there. And this is one of the things that I've myself have been very frustrated with in regard to the whole phenomenon, is the terms that we use in order to describe what it is that we're talking about. When, for example, when I myself say the word gray, the first thing that pops into my mind is a being that has wrinkled skin, has just the whole energy of fear for me personally. They have their heads are larger, but they're not huge. Their eyes are slightly slanted, that sort of thing. When I'm talking about the Greys that I'm talking about, if you wanted to call them that, these are 4 feet high with round black eyes and almost look like robots. There's no features to them whatsoever. They're very androgynous. These other Greys with the wrinkled skin, and they kind of, you know, their little tiny noses, those are a completely different breed. So there needs to be clarification in that. Here's what I tell people also. There is something that needs to be said about the understanding of people out there when someone such as myself comes forward. When we talk to you about our experiences, we talk to you about them not only from what it is that we've experienced, but also from our perceptions, understanding, and how much we were taught by them. So this is very important, because if 5 people witness a car accident, all 5 people are going to tell a slightly different story. So the question is the person telling the story a story maker? Are they somebody that, you know, embellishes? You have to take that into account. Is the person a very fastidious storyteller where they're telling every detail? You know, you have to take a look at the individual also to be able to know how to take that story. So when it comes to these beings, I've also been told by certain individuals that these, quote, grays have been seen with the tall blondes and that their agenda is very dark. But here's what I say. And again, this really needs to be having some clarification out there regarding this phenomenon. I pray that if there are these beings, I would ask these people watching to ask themselves this. I pray that if there are caretakers that are looking over us and watching over us, and if they are somehow related to God in any way, shape, or form, that they not judge me on the evil people of this earth, because we all look the same. Our general descriptions are the same. So because I am white, I pray that I am not judged by the evil of other white people. So when you come across one of these beings, whether it is in your dreams, which they can come to you in, or whether it is in the astral, which means your light body is leaving you, or whether it is physical, ask yourself this, right from here. Do I have fear, or am I simply just afraid? Do I have fear or terror? Because if you have terror, you need to understand that, and you need to say, no, I am not going to do this. I am not going to participate. I do not and will not be a part of this.
Right. They need to protect themselves, and they have this power.
Yes.
And they need to know they have this power.
Yes.
And that's a very important message.
Yes, it is very important. People forget that. They say, oh, I don't have any control, I don't have any power. You do have a certain amount of power regarding this phenomenon when you're having contact. And so it is really important to protect yourself in that way, mentally. And that's why, again, these tall blondes make it very clear that we need to educate ourselves not only in what's happening around us in the world, but also on a more spiritual level. Because the more spiritually aware you become, the stronger you become, the more informed as to how it is that you can move forward spiritually and in the astral and in the dreams to be able to protect yourself from some of these other beings. All of them, all of the beings that are out there, whether it be grays or tall blondes, each one that I meet individually, I make them look at me in my eyes. I make them look so that if they're looking at me and they're looking all over the place like this, I say, no, no, no. I remember one dream in particular. The 2 blondes came to me and they were trying to give me this very, very strong message. And I said to them, you need to look at me. And they said, there's no time, there's no time. And I said, no, you either stop and look at me so that I can look in your eyes, or I'm not speaking to you. So I looked in their eyes and I recognized them as being peaceful and from the right heart. Because you can't look at someone at their, you know, at the rest of their body. When we want to know who someone is, even in this world, we stop and we look at their eyes. Can I look at their eyes and be comfortable? We have instant recognition as to whether or not we care for someone or not. So use that in this phenomenon as well. And if you do not want this happening, tell them and just keep telling them that you do not and are not a willing participant, and you demand that they stop. And you need to verbalize that. Will it stop? I don't know. It depends on your spirit. It depends on how strong you are.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's very important, and I'm glad we can put that out there.
What I would like to share with everyone is that people like myself all over the earth are being stirred to movement. And that stirring and that movement, I believe, is very relevant for every single human being on the earth. I believe that because we are being awakened to begin sharing this information with people, that there are great changes that are coming, and that we need to all understand that. What is this great knowledge? The knowledge is that we're not alone, that we're being watched, that what we're doing is being looked upon by other beings that do have a certain amount of knowledge that we ourselves do not have. And that we need to take responsibility for ourselves. Only as the individual. You're not responsible for the earth. You're responsible for yourself. Accept that. Because we are all being awakened, we are all making the connections with one another. Where this will all lead, I believe that all of us are waiting to see. Because nothing is for sure. We're writing this plan as we're going through it. One of the greatest concerns that I have in the views, the visions that I was shown, the information that was shared to me on board that craft, they talked to me a lot when I was with them about seeds. And I'm always trying to share this information with people. One of the things that could save this earth is seeds. Because if every individual on the planet planted a small garden, we would not have to produce as much oil or transportation or pollution or plastics to, everything. It would also give every individual on the planet a taste again, a glimpse of why we're here, to be able to experience the beauty around us. Now, I'm going to ask everyone to take away from this whole interview today, if they educate themselves on any one thing, I'm going to ask them to educate themselves on what is happening to the Earth's seeds. Because it is of great concern to these tall blondes, and always has been. And even for myself, what I have learned in the last few years regarding seeds and what's happening on the earth, it is the greatest concern that every individual should have. If you accept that we're not alone, that's great. But educate yourself on seeds, because it will change your view in the world, and it will change the course of this earth for the better.
Wonderful. Okay, that's a very different take than you generally hear, and I think there's a lot of wisdom there in that approach. You don't even need free energy if you just plant a garden, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I wanted to share something else.
Okay.
You asked me a question. You asked me a question regarding something that was given to me. Mm-hmm. And I know that anyone watching this is going to be going back to that, right, because it's very important.
Yeah.
When I was on board the craft in 1988, I had memories come back to me from childhood that were very interesting, because it was of a time when I was a very young child, about 4 or 5 years old, when I was taken on board a craft. And this memory came back to me very, very clearly. So I really get into the details of this in the book, because it is a key point to this phenomenon for myself. Now, to take this story and put it into a few sentences, I was taken on board a craft when I was 4 years old, and during that time these beings gave me something, and they told me to bury it. And they said that one day I would know what it was for, and that I would go back and find it. I get asked this all the time because I've written about it in great detail throughout the course of my life. Mm-hmm. This thing keeps coming up over and over and over again. I have not found it yet. I know the area that it is in, but I have not found it yet. The question again is it my imagination? Absolutely not. Because I have